And so I got into the fire community and just started reading more about that. Decided that's something I was interested in. I didn't want to work my entire life. I'd much rather have free time to myself and would have passive income than to slave away for 20, 30 years and not get anywhere really.
This is the FI After 40 podcast, a show where I dive into the FIRE movement to see what financial independence is all about. I'll share the steps I've taken to start my journey toward becoming financially independent, and along the way I'll bring in others who are on a path of their own. You'll hear stories and advice from people who have reached their version of FI, and from those like me who are still finding their way. This is a show for anyone who wants to learn, grow, and connect with others. This is FI After 40. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Ben, and you're listening to the FI After 40 podcast, episode number 9. So I'm really excited about today's episode. I have the first ever guest on the podcast, which was really cool. I have Mitch on from highwaytoretirement.net, which is a blog about his FIRE journey. Mitch is from Australia, and he's only 21 years old, but he already has a target retirement age and FI number calculated. So it was really cool to hear him talk about what he's working towards with his FI journey. One of the things that really stood out to me is that he's not pulling in a huge income. In fact, he's earning minimum wage, but despite that, he has a target goal to be a millionaire in his early 30s. So it's a pretty amazing story, and I think you'll really enjoy hearing it. Before we jump into the interview with Mitch, I want to remind you to subscribe to the podcast. If you enjoy the episode, please leave a review for me. I would love to hear your feedback. You can always reach out to me on social media. I'm at FiAfter40 on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And now let's get to the conversation with Mitch from highwaytoretirement.net. All right, so I'm really excited here to have Mitch from highwaytoretirement.net on the podcast today. Thanks for joining in, Mitch. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Excited to be on the show.
Yeah, definitely. I know we got connected through, I think actually we first got in touch through another Australian blogger, Frugality and Freedom, and you had, I think, linked to one of my articles, and you were kind of like a guest curator on that website for a week. So how did that actually kind of come together? How did you get hooked up with that little promotional thing with that website?
Well, I've been following Michelle over at Frugality Flyer and Freedom for a while now, and then she does this weekly roundup on around Sunday, Monday, where it's just she tries to get someone on the show, not someone on the show, but someone on the website to just curate a couple of links for Australian bloggers and then a couple of international links, just trying to get more people exposure and all that. So she had a spot open for me, and I said, well, I'm free, might as well jump on and do it. And then I was looking around, and then of course I followed you on Twitter, and I thought might as well link to one of your articles. I really enjoyed it, so that's how I end up there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It was interesting. I just got an email saying, "Hey, you're featured on this newsletter this week," and I was, as I was an international contributor, from the Australian blog perspective. So yeah, it's pretty cool how we can connect across the world over kind of like-minded topics with financial independence. So yeah, excited to have you on the podcast and get to know a little bit more about your story. So I know you're located in Australia, so I'm not super familiar with the kind of geography. So where exactly in Australia are you?
I'm in central Queensland, so about 6 hours north of our state capital, Brisbane. So it's a pretty regional city, about 100,000 people. So
Okay.
yeah, it's pretty standard sized town for Australia.
Yeah. Yep. So are you on the coast, or are you a little inland from there?
We're about 20 kilometers inland, and then there's a little city on the coast called Yeppoon that's really pretty much connected.
Okay. And so how are things kind of going as far as right now? We're obviously going through the coronavirus pandemic. And so how are things kind of going in your area? I assume things are kind of locked down, a similar situation to what we have here in the US.
Yeah, there's a lockdown, but there's only 14 cases in the whole state, which is pretty lucky for us. And then there was one case in our city, and then pretty much that person didn't pass it on to anyone else, so pretty much no community transmission. So they're starting to be easing restrictions now. Restaurants are allowed to have 10 people in it now, which is starting to be all right, but everything's starting to slowly get back to normal pretty much.
Yeah, that's pretty similar to where I am. We're just starting to have like outdoor dining is available, but the tables need to be spaced apart, and so yeah, so we're kind of easing back into normalcy. So, but good to hear that things are going okay with you down there. Um, so let's jump over and get into a little bit more about kind of your background and how you got interested in financial independence. So, what was kind of the initial trigger for you to kind of get that interest in both, the fire movement, financial independence, kind of investing? What got you going down that track?
Well, it was firstly I started investing because it was mid 2018 and I was just going from casual job in Australia to casual job, which is just irregular hours. You're not rostered on. You can pretty much be let go the next day, and it's like that insecurity just made me like, oh, there has to be something better than this. And then so that led to investing, and then probably about 6 months down the track from that, that got me into the fire community. I was reading about investing, and that just naturally led onto that. And so I got into the fire community and just started reading more about that. Decided that's something I was interested in. I didn't want to work my entire life. I'd much rather have free time to myself and would have passive income than to slave away for 20, 30 years and not get anywhere really.
So is this something that is there anyone else that you knew personally that was kind of in the fire movement or interested in that, or was this really something that you kind of came across entirely on your own?
It was pretty much something I came across on my own. Like it was not nothing from people I knew in real life. It was pretty much all internet stuff. Like I've always been surrounded by people who've had entrepreneurial like businesses and all that. Pretty much living their life how they want to because they're their own boss and all that. But nothing like the fire like at all. Nothing about retiring early. They're just mainly just trying to focus on business building and still working pretty much full time at that. But I would much rather have time to live off passive income.
Yep, yep, definitely. So you started this at a kind of a younger age, maybe than some other people have. So how old are you now?
I'm only 21.
Okay, yeah. So you've got obviously a lot of runway ahead of you to get this going. So do you have kind of a target age or income number, like savings number that you're working towards? Have you already established some goals as far as that goes?
Well, yeah, I'm aiming for about 1.25 million in invested, yielding about 4% in dividends per year, which would be around about 45, 60,000, depending on just how good the yields are that year. And then, of course, if everything goes right, no dividend cuts, etc. But then that's going to take a fair bit of time. Probably it's calculated me about 12, 13 years at my current rate, just because I'm on a very, very low income, pretty much
Yep.
minimum wage.
So that's interesting, yeah, because I know a lot of people that talk about saving for retirement. They're really concerned with trying to get as high of an income as possible, and that obviously helps. But you know, I think coming from your perspective, even just starting early can really compensate for that. And you know, you're talking about having over $1 million in savings. So from what you've looked at numbers wise, that's a realistic goal for you if you focus on things over the next dozen years or so.
Yeah, I don't even have to beat the market to get that. I could underperform the market for 15 years and I'd still get there. I've just set a pretty realistic goal that I think would give me a nice cash supply each year to live off. And then that's really all I need. Anything extra than that is pretty much cash to play around with.
Nice. So you focused on the savings part of it there. So how do you kind of manage expenses? Is it something that are you somebody who is pretty good about saving or cutting back your expenses and having a pretty lower spending threshold, or is that something you've also had to adjust or take a look at?
I've always been a pretty low spender. I just don't really go out and do stuff. I don't really drink at all, go to the clubs or anything like all my friends do. So that saves anywhere from $200 from what they're telling me a week and all that. So I've always kind of had that. And then I've just kind of cut back on really my main thing was fast food. When I started, big expense was fast food and all that. And then so I've switched a lot to home cooking just to save money and all that. Other than that, really, I didn't have to adjust my spending at all to meet my goals.
Yeah, I think that's something that people who are focused on saving and having a more of a kind of frugal approach to things, that is something that's interesting to how do you fit that into your social life, So that's is that something that has been a challenge for you, or do you feel like people kind of understand where you're coming from and kind of respect what you're working towards as far as not spending money on a lot of extra stuff?
I think I'm getting away with it a bit now because most of my friends are in university and all that, and they don't have a lot of money to throw around. Most of it goes towards the clubs, and even before, I never really liked doing that anyway, so it hasn't really impacted. But stuff like social life, we still do a lot of free things, like we go to the beach and all that, or we catch a ferry to the island off the coast, which is only $20 for a return ticket, and that's a whole day of fun. So pretty much we find stuff to do that's cheap for everyone and just kind of plays into my lifestyle.
Nice. So when you think about your longer term goals, so let's say you're able to achieve, like you said, not even beating the market, just trying to have a pretty reasonable expectation. If you're able to retire in your early 30s, what do you kind of envision your life looking like after that? What are the things that you would want to put your money towards? Is travel one of those things? Like, what do you anticipate your life looking like when you get into that retirement phase?
It's definitely a lot of travel. I've been to a fair few countries already, which is pretty lucky. My parents have taken me to New Zealand and then China, Hong Kong, Fiji, and then Bali. So I've been to those, and then I went to Vietnam recently myself with my girlfriend on a pretty good holiday. And then so travel's always been something that I've always wanted to do, especially go to Europe and America and just explore the world. So that's what most of my free time would be doing.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a great goal to have. Me coming from, I live in the United States, obviously, and I've most of my travel I've done to Europe and then just kind of locally in North America. So it's kind of if we balance out our two travel journeys, we've got most of the world there. But I have
Yeah,
not
pretty
been over
much.
to the Australia area. I haven't been to Asia. So of those places that you named, what were your favorite places that you've traveled so far?
Oh, so far, the two places I like the most would have to be Vietnam's number one. Just the people there and the scenery is just amazing. Like I've never seen a place so green and so just the air smells amazing. And it was just probably the most amazing time there. And everything, the cost value over there was $1 of ours was about $17,000 in their money. And pretty much you could pick up a snack for 50 cents and then a drink for $1. So we had a pretty good time for around $1,700 each, which included flights. So it was a very cheap holiday. So
Wow.
that's probably my number one.
What's like number two for you?
Number two would have to be New Zealand, which is very similar to Australia, just a bit more expensive, really. But the food over there is amazing, and it's one of my favorite movies, Lord of the Rings, was made there. So it's always great to go over there and visit the film sets that you can do over there. And then I was over there recently, just before COVID happened. We were actually there. I forgot to say that, but we had to come back due to our borders closing. But it was amazing anyway.
Wow, yeah, that's something I love the Lord of the Rings movies as well, and that's probably a pretty. I assume that in that region, that's a pretty notable location for like tourism at this point. It's a beautiful area to begin with, but I think with the movies having been filmed there, and those were obviously a big hit across the world, it's probably a spot that people like to go and kind of see. Do they still have like any of the sets kind of still up? Can you see like the villages where the Shire was and some of that stuff?
Yeah, there's the whole Hobbit and Shire there. You can actually go and see they one of the tours. You actually get to meet up at the inn they meet up in the first movie and all that. So you meet there for the tour and you get to go through most of the sets. And then I think there's two main sets. One was the Shire, and then the other one's the human town nearby.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah. So I think that's a great goal for you to work towards. Travel, it's an amazing experience, and it's interesting. I've heard people talk about how actually traveling to certain countries is cheaper than living at home because like you said, the cost conversion in some countries is just far different from what your home residence might be. So actually going to some of these places, you can travel for weeks and weeks, and over the course of the year, you're actually saving money on what you might have been paying for like rent or food back home. So that's really, I think that's a pretty cool goal for you as you move forward. So we talked a little bit about some of your investment goals. I just wanted to dig into that a little bit more. So, what's your general strategy when it comes to investing? I know that you have mostly is it's the Australian stock market. I'm not sure what the exact phrasing is, but is that what you've basically focused on, or do you also look kind of internationally at other stock markets as well?
I've looked at a few international markets. Really, I look at companies that take my eye, but most of them, just because I'm Australian, I know Australian businesses, so I stick to the ASX or the Australian Stock Exchange, and then, well, Australian Securities Exchange is the correct term, but I just think that I understand Australian businesses more, and then the Australian Stock Exchange is just very like very well regulated. Like the companies have to post earnings on the day, otherwise they get banned from trading, and like not a lot of sketchy stuff can go on. So I just feel very safe investing in the Australian market. And there's plenty of companies. Pretty much Australia's 2% of the world's market, but we have companies that make up some of the best in the world, such as Afterpay is a big one that's coming out and all that that's taken over the world. And then we have PushPay coming to the United States, which is a big player in the non-profit organization. And then we just have a lot of world-class companies. I feel like in 20 years we'll probably be some of the bigger players as Australia grows faster than other nations. Just because our population is small, I feel very comfortable investing in Australia.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, have you focused mostly on individual stocks for individual companies, or do you mix that with, are there like index funds that you can look at, or how do you focus your investing strategies?
I'm a big investor in healthcare. I've invested in I only have one ETF in my portfolio, and that's the iShares Global 1200 healthcare portfolio. So it's got the 1200 biggest global healthcare companies, and that's just outperformed most other benchmarks. I think it's averaged 18% over the last 5 years. So that's my main index. Other than that, I don't own any. I have a listed investing company that has some of the world's bigger technology companies. Other than that, it's all individual companies. I got a fair few low cap ones that I feel have the chance to 10 or 20 times value in 10 or so years just because of their groundbreaking technology. But other than that, I got a couple of medium cap blue chip dividend payers that have been around in Australia for decades, such as Woolworths and all that. Mostly just solid companies that pay reliable dividends make up a solid part of my portfolio. That and some REITs.
Yeah, nice. So has it been obviously we've talked a little bit about the coronavirus, and that's obviously impacted the global economy. So has that kind of changed anything for you strategically? Has that how has that kind of impacted your approach with this?
I saw a large decline in my holdings when it all took a hold, but most of them have pretty much operated through it without any hassle. So I pretty much haven't had to adjust. Pretty much my stock portfolio is back to where it was pretty much today. I was looking, and it's back to where it was pre-COVID levels. So I'm not that concerned with how I'm going. And before that, I was about a 45% return over 2 years. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and then see how it works since I've got plenty of time to make mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits of starting kind of early in your career is if you're looking as a long-term investment and to ride through those ups and downs, you can kind of make up for those inevitable dips that we're going to see. And this was obviously a pretty big one, but it's actually kind of crazy how quickly it also has bounced back up. So I think that's definitely a good strategy for you to have as far as that long term hold. Um, so with the stocks that you've hung on to, I know that you kind of try to pick through and recommend different ones. So what's the real what about, I guess, stocks and the stock market investing is something that is really interesting to you? Was it something that you kind of have developed a passion for, or was it something that you've had for a little while now?
I kind of started back at school. We had an assignment where we had to research the company and do some graphing based off returns and estimated returns and all that. So that kind of got me interested back in school. But then it was pretty much as I was saying a couple of years ago, I just thought there must be some better way. And pretty much all the research I did, real estate was way too expensive in Australia. Like you pretty much cannot get a foot in the door without either having $500,000 in your bank account, which is pretty impossible without investing in the first place. So stocks were pretty much the go-to place for someone with around $1,500 to play around with.
So with real estate, that's interesting because that's another strategy that a lot of people have as far as investments go. So I wasn't aware what the market was there. I know it's pretty hot in the U.S. It's dipped down a little bit with this pandemic, but so real estate in general, that's a pretty tough entry level investment for people in Australia as well.
It's incredibly hard. in our capital cities, a lot of the median house prices are above $1.5 million, and you cannot get in there without having a significant amount of bank in the pocket. And then it's like I'm pretty lucky where I am. The average house price is around 300,000, so in a couple of years it'll be achievable. But in any other place in Australia, it's pretty much the same as the capital cities, all out of price unless you want to live in a regional town.
Is that a strategy that you have? Are you looking to save up towards investing in either just like a primary residence or like an investment property, or is that something that you're not really focused on?
Probably looking at buying a duplex or something like that just to live in one side, rent out the other, and pretty much have that housing pay for the other one. But in Australia, you get some pretty good tax codes for that.
Yeah, that's I think that kind of house hacking approach. That's something I've definitely looked at. I've talked to other people about. Having your living expenses tend to take up a huge chunk of your expenses every month anyway. So if you could have a tenant pay for all or most of that, that's a great strategy to have. And it's interesting. Yeah, it sounds very similar to where I am. It's average home prices are pretty high as well here. So I'm still looking at maybe a duplex or a triplex or something along those lines, and I think that's a pretty common strategy. So hopefully that works out for you.
Yeah, there's a couple of properties around that are starting to catch my eye, but just still a bit out of the price range. Probably another couple of years, and then there's a couple of multi-story buildings that are pretty cheap around the 500,000 level, but not sure about the quality of them. But still, it's pretty interesting that you could buy a five person home or five family home for $100,000 a piece when a one family home costs around 300,000, and then you can just rent out the four other units and then pretty much have a sustainable cash flow to pay your bills, the taxes on it, and then enough to left over to just do whatever you want with it.
So I wanted to just jump over and talk for a second also about just your blog and kind of what got you started on that. So how did you decide to start writing about your journey and your experience?
Well, I was probably 6 months into reading everyone else's blogs. So I was really getting into it. I thought maybe people would want to hear what I say, and it was slowing down at work that I would have spare time just to work on all my lunch times. So I thought might as well start it. It's pretty cheap. Everyone can make a website nowadays. So I jumped on there and then just started writing. And then, as always, you get better and better the more you do. Started improving it, just getting better and better. And I feel pretty confident now and just enjoy writing.
What kind of a response have you gotten from people? Have you gotten kind of comments and feedback and encouragement from other people in the community?
Yeah, I always had positive encouragement. Haven't had a negative comment to date, but not sure if that's just because everything spam sort of filters it out, all that. But so
Yeah.
far, nothing but positive feedback.
Yeah, I've found since I put this together, it's been really cool to just connect with other people. Like, this conversation we're having right now, like this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't started writing a blog, and if you hadn't started writing a blog. And so, it's just pretty cool that you have a chance to find other people out there that have similar interests. Money isn't something that people are always talking about openly. It's just tends to be kind of a topic that is, you know,
It's the one thing that's the universal issue that everyone has either has good experience with it or bad experience with it, and everyone can kind of relate to it. So that's the amazing thing about the global fire community is everyone's pretty much in the same position.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean it's the same strategies, it's the same problems that people have, the same motivations, just all over the world. And so yeah, it is amazing that that's just a common interest and a common goal for so many people. I didn't realize how much of a focus that there was in Australia until I kind of saw some of the blogs coming over, and there's like this whole movement there as well. And I'm sure you could find it pretty much anywhere you go.
Yeah, it's pretty good being able to find people that relate to you everywhere around the world, just knowing that there's people in the same boat as you who are experiencing the same news as you, that you're not alone metaphorically in the struggle against full-time work.
Yep, yep, and that's I think is something that I've thought about. So I'm coming at this at a different point in my life. I'm in my early 40s. You're in your early 20s, and it's again I think we both have different. We're at different points in our life, obviously, and we have slightly different strategies, but we're really working towards the same thing. And I think that's what's really cool about this is it really doesn't matter how old you are, how far into your career you are, just starting and taking positive steps and making progress, within 5, 10, 15 years, you can make a huge difference in your life if you just focus your resources on on saving and investing versus spending and increasing your debt.
Yeah, no, it's always good to see just everyone trying to cut back and save more, invest more, and just better themselves by doing things a different way to the rest of the world.
Well, I think it's impressive that you have come as far as you have even early on, and I think the idea of somebody who is saying, "Hey, listen, I'm not bringing in a ton of income. I'm working off minimum wage, but I've got this really realistic and um, you know aggressive goal to save and retire early." It's just to me an example of how mindset makes such a big difference for people. It's something that it's easier to just assume that you're not going to be able to retire early and to not even try for it. But if I think you just focus on it, regardless of if you're 20, if you're 40, it's a realistic option for everybody if you just put the time into it.
Yeah, especially I've found with my friends that they don't really have the mindset that they're going to be wealthy or rich. They have the paycheck to paycheck mentality already when before they've even tried to do anything else. And that's what kind of annoys me mostly out of anything is that they're not willing to change their mindsets to realize, hey, this is possible if I just sit down, think about it, plan my life out, plan my spending, and realistically I could be a millionaire by the time I'm 30, 35, 40, 45. It's better than reaching the age of retirement and not having 300,000, 400,000 in your bank account, just wondering where it's all gone.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a mindset thing. Yep, and I think it is very easy to fall into that paycheck to paycheck mentality. It's something that I lived for most of my working adult life in that exact same mentality, and so thankfully now I've turned the corner and I've got more of a focus. But again, it's great to see what you've done so far. So if people want to learn more about your journey, kind of follow you, where are the best places for them to keep track of what you're working on?
The best place would be to follow my blog at highway2retirement.net, and that has the links to my social media, which are Twitter is highway2retire with the number in the middle, and then my Facebook is highway2retire.
Awesome. Mitch, thank you so much for coming on today. This is a really great conversation. I think it's great to see what you've done, and I'm hoping that people get something out of this. It's a really positive message, and again, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Ben.
I want to again say thank you to Mitch for coming on and sharing his story. I loved hearing about his goals and the mindset that he's adopted at a pretty young age. I think it's really a lesson for all of us that having your goals outlined and focusing on saving can really yield amazing results. A few points he made that I want to highlight. Number one, travel is something that really, many of us feel like we can't afford it or it's really expensive, and it can be. But I think his trip to Vietnam is a great example of how affordable international travel can really be. So if you can plan ahead and A, budget for it, and B, find places that the currency conversion is in your favor, you can really make affordable travel something that is realistic for you. Number two, it doesn't take a ton of time to really start educating yourself on the concept of investing in stocks. It's something that he picked up at a pretty young age and pretty quickly, and he's learned a ton. He, obviously was very confident with the different businesses and strategies that he has, so it was really impressive to see how much he's learned in a pretty short period of time. And three, it's really not about how much money you make. It's about the habits that you form. So you don't need to be making six figures to become a millionaire. Really, it's more about what are you saving? What are your expenses? How do you manage those things? And I think by having really clear goals and a clear vision of where you want to be, that's what's going to get you to the point where you can choose what's your retirement date, what's your income that you need, and it gives you really control over what you're doing. So yeah, it was a great conversation. I'm glad that Mitch was able to come on, and I hope that you really got a lot from that conversation. I do have a few other guests lined up that are coming up in future episodes, so I'm excited to get them on as well so you can hear their stories. If you are interested in being a guest, or if you have a suggestion for somebody you think I should interview, please drop me a note on social media, or you can reach out to me through fiafter40.com. You can fill out the form under Collaborate. You can get me at fiafter40 on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can always read more at fiafter40.com. That's it for now. Thanks for listening to the Fi After 40 podcast. To read more about my story, be sure to follow me at Fi After 40 on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also subscribe to receive updates whenever new content goes up at fiafter40.com. Also, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and review. It makes a big difference. Thanks for listening.